Hello and welcome to Politics. Today I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Viewers, budget is about to be presented, federal budget of Pakistan. In view of that, we are going to talk about more or less economic affairs. But right now, the biggest and most interesting political debate that is going on, or exchange of words that is going on, is between Sindh or People's Party and the federal government, which is ruled by Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. The most interesting part is that the Chief Minister of Sindh, Murtad Ali Shah, wrote a letter day before yesterday to the Prime Minister. In that letter, he actually complained that there is some kind of discrimination that is going on against the province of Sindh. And in that letter, he also highlighted the PSDP and how it actually invests in 20 plus highways in Punjab and only 2 in Sindh, and that his proposals were not taken on board. That said, remember, after immediately that, we saw a reaction coming from the PTI government, especially Asad Umar, who actually rebutted it. And then the gentleman you can see on the screen, the senior leader of PTI in Sindh, actually pointed out, Halim Adil Sheikh actually pointed out that the federal government has actually increased 30% the total allocations to Sindh's uplift. That is not all. But then we keep on seeing these exchanges, and on the other side, we have to actually look into what is going on ground as well. Remember that there are 2 concerns that have been flagged in the past. Every time the federal government actually planned or announced, and we are not talking about this federal government only, bear in mind that the People's Party has been ruling Sindh for over a decade now. And in that situation, whenever the federal government actually allocated some funds, for example, I remember Nawaz Sharif allocated 15 billion rupees for Green Line bus service in Karachi. There was a retort that came, and it was deemed an intervention or a violation of 18th Amendment. We are going to talk about how PSDPs are prepared, and we are also going to talk about ADP, because usually the provincial governments have their own annual development plans, and where they actually can utilize the part of the National Finance Award, NFC actually. So we are going to talk about all these matters and more in order to help us understand these issues. In the studio, I am joined by Amir Zafar Tutani Saab, who is the president of Re-Energia, but also represents the development sector. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. On Skype, we are joined by On Abbas Bappi Saab, who is Senator of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. From Karachi, representing People's Party, we are joined by Ali Rashid Saab. Thank you very much, Ali Rashid Saab, for being part of the program as well. With both the other 2 gentlemen, let me start with Ali Rashid Saab. Ali Rashid Saab, quick question to you. Why do you think the CM Sindh needed to actually launch this broadside so close to the budget?
Sorry, what was the question? Why did the CM Sindh need to
launch this attack on the federal government so close to the budget?
I think the timing does not have to do anything with the budget coming, but I think it's a good time because in case there are some issues which need to be addressed, I think just to get his attention so Sindh can get its due share and things can go smoothly, and to also remind him that in case he plans on being unfair again like he's been in the past with the province of Sindh, with the NFC, then we will create issues. We
Right.
won't
I'm
get.
later in the program. I'm going to ask you about these issues. How do you plan to create those issues? But before that, let me also remind you that there are better forums available. For example, there is an ECC where the provincial government is represented. Then there is the CCI, which could also be used to actually flag these issues. Why write a letter and then send it to the media?
We've actually written a lot of letters. We have also tried to meet him. I think push has come to shove. Every time he visits the province of Sindh, we have categorically extended an invitation, and we've actually wanted to meet him. So, in fact, not just meet him, give him the due protocol to receive him, just so he can have a few meetings with us and hear us out. But seems like he's the Prime Minister of Punjab or KP. He's isolating Sindh, and he doesn't.
Right, and later in the program, we are also going to discuss whether People's Party often chooses to cash on what is often pejoratively called the Sindh card. But let me first go to, with your permission, Durrani Saab, let me go first to Honor Bappi Saab, so that then we can have a neutral observer's input at the end. But let me first bring in PTI's Senator. Sir, your reaction to the letter, the way it was written, and you have listened to the response coming from People's Party.
Thank you so much, Pitafi sir, for having me in the program. I basically see it as an election stance. If you just notice what has been going around for the last 2 months, the whole narrative coming up from the Karachi towards either Lahore or Islamabad has been a bit weird. Starting from the water issue, which was raised probably 3 weeks back and was clearly indicated that it's more of a political issue, rather some issue which could create a problem between the two provinces. Then going on further with the statement, what actually Bilawal Zardari Sahab just said about the Raiwind and the Ladkhana, coming up to what actually Muradari Shah again said this whole thing. I think People's Party is planning to start the election campaign, and you rightly said they are playing the Sindh card very in time. If you go by the facts, they'll actually nullify the whole position they have taken. Just to give you a brief figure of what they have been getting in the last 13 years, you just said decade, it's more than that. It's 13 years they've been a government, and out of the NFC budget, they got out 14 trillion rupees. Pitafi sahab, you can well see, I can just assure you, start your journey from Sadkabad onwards till Hyderabad, and you'll see that the amount they got from the federal government, from all the federal governments, what has been done in Sindh. Just again to remind you that this year, what Muradari Shah Sahab just said, just to give you a figure, this present federal government has allocated 30% more budget in the 3 years of its term than the previous 3 years of the Noon League government. And to give you an idea, that only 200 billion rupees was set up only this year for Sakkar Hyderabad motorway. Now I can assure you that being in term for the last 4 times in the last 30 years, People's Party has never started one motorway in their own province. This is the first time any federal government which does not have any other stake within the Sindh province in the rural Sindh, but we have only stakes in the Karachi only. We have allocated 200 billion rupees in this PSDB for Sakkar Hyderabad motorway. And there are so many other things going on, Green Line and all other things. But just to start this whole thing, I am sure what the honorable colleague from People's Party just said, that if the PM was representing as the PM of Punjab, I think it is exactly the other way around. People's Party has been only sorted themselves out in the Sindh only. They are a Sindh regional party, not a federation party anymore. They do not have stakes in Punjab. They do not have stakes in KP, Balochistan or any other part of the Pakistan. And not doing so at this point in time probably will not play with them. So I think they are politically very right.
Right.
But I think
Ahmed Durrani Saab, you have made your point, sir. You have made your point. I'm going to come back to you, sir. But just to clarify our point, I didn't say that People's Party is using SIND card. I said there are allegations, and there have been allegations in the past that People's Party does use it. Well, let me come to the studio. Amit Duptani sahab, you have listened to the two sides. You have seen the exchange that went on television between Asad Umar and the CM Sindh. What do you make of it?
Well, actually, I think there's a bit of misinformation and absence of facts on all sides.
Okay.
First, I just want to say hello to Ali Rashid, who happens to be, a colleague.
Okay.
And so I hope he's hearing me. So my regards to him. But I think that the important thing here, and also I think Bapi Saab should also add on, and I thought I mentioned this before we were entering the program. First and foremost, let's separate the infrastructure issue, right?
Okay.
So federal infrastructure, which is called strategic infrastructure, such as highways and motorways, right? Motorways can be of two types. One can be a provincial motorway, one can be a federal motorway. A federal motorway is one which connects the country to all parts. So it's a right of the all citizens to have at least one access between point A and B, irrespective of province or whatever. So according to the Constitution, despite the evolution of the concurrent list, we still I don't think people are clear that these motorways, especially the Karachi-Hyderabad, that was mentioned many times, is actually a federal subject.
Okay.
So what the Federation spends on it ends up being part of its PSDP.
Okay.
Second, I think, again, I think both PTI, PPP, everybody needs to remember that fundamentally the bigger pool is not here. This is just the public sector development program that has oscillated between 300 billion to over $1 trillion, gone back to 700, and we are not even able to spend most of it.
You're talking about the federal pool right now.
Yeah, so basically what I'm talking about is the NFC, the National Finance Commission. And I think the point to be made there is before Sindh starts saying, or anybody starts saying that who is playing which card, we should realize that Sindh's share from the federal divisible pool has remained unchanged from what PPP established in the last award, which did happen when PPP was in power. PLN was unable to bring the NFC award CCI together. So I think the important thing here is that, do we get our facts right? Because ultimately the judge of what Sindh gets is how the Sindh government, out of the second largest share in Pakistan, goes to Sindh.
Right. So, just to help us demystify the issue, when the CM Sindh is writing a letter and complaining that there hasn't been enough allocation in Sindh regarding highways, so is he within his rights? Do you think he is doing the right thing?
Yeah, I think, look, he's within his rights for one reason, which is that if cities in Sindh are not connected to other cities in Pakistan, Sindh suffers from being connected to those cities, and hence trade or internal trade gets. But I think the other point which I think the minister should realize is, why would Pakistan or the federal government of Pakistan want to cut its own feet by not allocating connectivity between Karachi and the rest of Pakistan? 98% of everything we bring in comes through those two ports. Right?
Right. But just to understand, ADP doesn't focus on any roads at all?
No, ADP has its own share. So the CWD department in Sindh has a very, so those are basically rural roads, provincial roads, and then provincial highways. So they're all coming, the Federation does not pay for them, but the Federation indirectly pays for them when it basically, let's say the Federation collects 100 rupees, which becomes the divisible pool. That divisible pool is fed by customs duties, by income tax, by the fuel sets, etc., which we call the vertical part of the pool. Then that pool is taken, and based on a formula, a part of that pool,
NFC formula,
it's NFC formula, and you give it up. So let me get one thing straight. 100 rupees collected, no matter what the actual amount is, right? Sindh gets about 25 to 28% rupees. Punjab gets about 50 rupees, right? This formula has been agreed on a formula based on which was settled in the PPP, last PPP government. Now, remember that of the total collection, 42.5%. So 42.5 rupees are actually what is allocated back to the provinces, right? What is then remaining, which is 57.5 rupees, is if you take out the debt expenditure and the key development side of the armed forces expenditure, there's nothing left. So essentially, you need to borrow to run the government.
And that's why we have seen back and forth between the Federation and the provinces as well, especially when it came to Pata, elsewhere as well. For example, the northern areas of Gilgit-Baltistan, their development. But let me ask you one more thing. Sindh says that it is the province that collects the maximum tax. Is it correct?
It depends on how you define tax. You see, Sindh keeps changing the definition of tax. But let's look at what the contribution of Sindh is in the federal divisible pool. So three things have to be understood. First and foremost, the two ports of Pakistan collectively roughly 30 to 40% of the total revenue. That is not Sindh's revenue. That is for imports coming into Pakistan, paying federal taxes, for goods utilized not in Sindh only, but all over Pakistan. So just that blows this out of the water that Sindh collects the most revenue. No, it does not. But when you look at income tax, yes, if you look by share of GDP, so Punjab contributes 60% or thereabouts of GDP every year. Sindh contributes less than about 20 or maybe 18%. Now, yes, because Sindh has Karachi, which is the port, and every ports are by nature the finance capitals of most countries. Yes, the income tax collection and other collections there are high. So I think this is a very unfair thing to say that Sindh collects all that. Were the ports not there, there would be no collection. And those ports collection, everything is a federal subject. Please remember that.
Ali Rashid Saab, you have listened to the arguments here. And the question is, while the Sindh government is blaming the federal government for not allocating the kind of resources that the Sindh government expects, the problem or the question is, why is the Sindh government not redeploying its own assets to actually develop infrastructure in Sindh?
Actually, to be honest with you, we have been allocating funds and doing whatever we could, and in fact, some of the schemes.
Go ahead, carry on. Ali Rashid Saab, can you hear me? Ali Rashid Saab, the question was, what are you doing to actually develop Sindh? Let me go to Bapi Saab. Senator Saab, the question again, as pointed out by Amit Rani Saab, is that the federal government actually has to invest in Sindh as well. And there seems to be some kind of discrepancy when it comes to comparing the projects you have in Punjab and the projects you have in Sindh.
As Durrani Sahib rightly said, if you just look at the figures which the federal government have been allocating for the Sindh in the last 3 years, rightly said that was their due share. It's not any sort of a good thing that the federal government is doing doing something extra towards the Sindh government, that we had to do it anyway. But it just reminds me of the 90s politics. Just think of it. If I remember Nawaz Sharif mourning to the federal government back in 90s when Benazir Bhutto Sahiba was in Islamabad as the Prime Minister, that Lahore is not getting a due share. Exactly the same vibes are being done. When actually NFC award is being written down, nobody can really go against the NFC award that has been written down. So that is exactly one thing is right. Number two, what actually Murad Ali Shah have said, that the Sindh government is not taken on board on the development projects that are being done in Sindh. Now, we are a stakeholder in Sindh as well, as much as the Sindh government is. We have 14 seats in Karachi, more than any other stakeholder in Karachi. So we know where actually things are. We know K4 project is very important for the Karachi people. We know the Green Line is very important for the Karachi people. So the majority of the money that the federal government have been allocating, especially this year, have been going to these two major projects, which probably Sindh government thinks that putting money in Karachi's pocket will be unfair for the Sindh probably. Actually, this is not what the Sindh government is saying. This is basically what they're talking about themselves and not the people of Sindh. So the people of Sindh actually stays everywhere in Sindh, rather they're in Hyderabad or Sakkar or Karachi. So the allocation of the Sindh by the federal government is totally a choice of the federal government where they spend it. So rather going for small roads or something, we decided to go for big projects which really matters for the Sindh. So I think this is where actually the issue lies, and that should not be. It is a more of an election rerun for the Sindh government to prepare itself for the upcoming elections, and 2 years is the right time to start over it probably.
Right. But 2 years before the elections, they have started fighting with the centre. This seems to be quite interesting because you are talking about the federal budget. Right. Come again, sir.
I think this is what they normally do. If you go to historic data, this is not normally they do. I mean, the water issue was raised almost 20 days back. It is nowhere discussed again. Now it's a development issue. After, I can assure you, 10 days time, there will be another issue. So things will keep creeping up, and there will be more and more issues from the Karachi side pointing towards Islamabad that they're being unfair. It is more of election thought. I don't think so. There's more to do with the strategic issues.
Right, sir. Ali Rashid Saab is back. Ali Rashid Saab, you were responding to the question that I asked. And it was about your own resources, Sindh's resources.
Yeah.
Where are they?
Yeah, our resources are there, and they're being, whatever we can do, we're obviously doing. But the thing is, you see, as you said, there were other forums also where we could have discussed this and talked about this. And I think that's also a bone of contention for us, because by the Constitution, Article 54, I think 156, there are certain number of meetings which need to be held in a year of the National Economic Council, which haven't been held. So how do we, I mean, we are in a tricky situation. I mean, if the PM comes to Sindh, does not want to meet us, then the elections, which the forum in which we're supposed to raise these issues and talk to them, those meetings are not being held. Then we write a letter, and I would like to ask you, do you think in the letter, the points which were mentioned, is there anything which is, out of line? I think there are fair, points, valid points, which have been brought up.
I'm not saying that there is anything out of line here. My question basically is, and that's why I actually raised the issue of fora. Can you give me an example when the Chief Minister might have picked up a telephone, called the PM office, and the Prime Minister refused to talk to him? Or for that matter, Finance Minister actually refused to talk to him? And this question about using the SIM card. So I will like you to actually respond to both these things.
Okay. Now the thing is, I was hearing a few people talk. So first of all, I would like to do a fact check here that Karachi or Sindh do not actually pay the highest taxes in Pakistan. If you actually minus the ports, as was mentioned right now, if you minus the ports and you minus everything else, which is there. If you just pick up the Sadr and Liaqatabad market of Karachi, they pay more tax than Lahore and Islamabad put together. So it's not that that Sindh is not paying their taxes, and obviously,
But the question that originally was asked was that, of course, the Sindh government is getting funds from the divisible pool. Is it not?
Yeah, and
the Sindh government has the capacity. So why is it not developing infrastructure? You were responding to that, and then the connection broke, and you could not finish that thought.
Right now, as we speak, there are 20 mega projects going on in Karachi alone. And if you ever visit Karachi, I would love to take you on a tour and show you what's happening. So things are happening. It's not that whatever resources we have, we are not using. But besides that, obviously, when we feel that our due share is not given, we will talk. And as my friend here is saying that, it's because of election, but the elections aren't for the next 2 years. These are crises. And as you said that the opposition or People's Party always has some issue or the other with you guys being PTI, that's because you guys are creating a lot of issues. Wheat crisis, flour crisis, sugar crisis, law and order, when that whole TLC thing happened, you cannot, you can't, it's just not working out. Things need a lot of improvement, and it's our job. It's our country, and we are all in it together. Let it be opposition or the ruling party. So if we feel that you're not performing somewhere, it is our duty to actually raise our voices and highlight those issues. So please be prepared. Yes, tomorrow again we will have an issue. Day after again we'll have an issue, and we'll keep having issues till you guys don't improve your performance.
Right, but the question then eventually has to be about federal performance versus the provincial performance, right? And especially given that two different parties are ruling at two different places. But the concern again, and I'm going to come back to you about this, you said that when I come to Karachi, I often come to Karachi, and with due respect, regardless of whatever projects are going on, it is one of those cities that seem to have actually graduated from second world category to the third world category, and that actually saddens me. But let me come back to the studio. Dutani Saab, your response, because both these sides actually were objecting to your interpretation, particularly Ali Rashid Saab.
Yeah, well, what Ali said is right. I mean, that's exactly what I said. I mean, I'm saying when you say in toto, Karachi contributes or Sindh contributes more than Pakistan, he said if you subtract the ports, a market in Jodhia Bazaar versus a market in Lahore, yes, I agree with you.
Okay.
Because the thing is that they are slightly better documented and more financially included.
Right.
So for income tax
Karachi is a big city, right?
It's a huge city.
Punjab may not have a Karachi, but it has many cities right from Lahore to Faisalabad, Gujarat, Gujranwala.
Let me give you. I mean, let me say that's where I think I have to support what Ali is saying.
Yeah,
it's not what the party is saying, but what Ali is saying. The number is actually right. Punjab's basic collection should be through the agri income tax. Sindh should be number 2 because Sindh is a large agricultural contributor, but not as large as Punjab. Simple thing. There are more agri markets because of the way we handle agricultural produce. Punjab ends up being informal. It cheats Pakistan out of taxes. That's a fact of life.
Okay.
But is that a fault of PTI?
No, we are going into a very new direction, that is agricultural tax. But we can talk about that as well. Yeah. We can talk about that as well. But for now, because there is a clash going on between two governments, I wanted to understand whose responsibility primarily it is to take care of the roads in Sindh.
Okay, so let me again regurgitate, reiterate.
No, but you're actually saying, again, you're saying that the highways, if you're going to call them highways, is responsibility of the federal government.
That's not what I said.
Okay,
can you
provincial and federal, right?
Yeah, let me clarify the purpose. So basically the purpose of a federal highway and the purpose of a provincial highway, rural road, a provincial road is different.
Okay.
These connect and are arteries that feed into the federal highways. The purpose of federal highways is to connect across Pakistan.
Okay.
That's why they are called, like nuclear power plants, strategic assets.
Right.
Right?
And has there not been any highway built up to Sindh?
Oh, there are many highways up to Sindh and within Sindh.
So
in fact, the first super highway in Pakistan was
I remember you used to travel on that as well.
Super highway, Bhutto's time, is basically started up. That's the end, basically the conversion start of N55 and N5.
So right now when the CM Sindh is writing a letter, are you sure that he is not actually shifting responsibility, because there are concerns that he could have built highways in the city, in the province as well?
If you allow me, look, I mean, because I have to be kind of factual and neutral.
Yeah.
So I basically think both the esteemed Chief Minister and the esteemed Chairman of the Planning Commission, are both of them in the exchange of words and heated debates forgot these basic classifications.
Right.
So the only thing in that letter, it's muddled up. It confuses between what is actually Sindh's responsibility, right, and what is in terms of functioning, improving, adding, right? So the federal government structure, let me actually give a very good global example. I think it makes life clear.
Okay.
So let's agree the fact that in the United States of America, right, 65% of all taxes that federal collects basically are spent on, are coming from income taxes, right? And they are also a similar amount is coming, and income tax is the only tax that actually stays with the Federation. Something very similar happens in Pakistan, if I'm very, very, open about it. So basically what's happening is your question, which has two parts, is that the federal government, it was never in their interest not to connect the country because number one, it harms security.
Right.
Number two, it harms trade, and it basically harms the entire economy of the country, right? Number two, I think the debate here, which I think we need to be very clear on, is that, and I think you have not mentioned it, so if you allow me, can I mention it?
Yeah.
And maybe the esteemed people, Bappi Saab and Ali Rashid, can comment on it. With the debate is basically that at the end of the day, if, let's say, the PSDP, okay, tomorrow Asad Umar and everybody and the ECNIC meets again and ECC meets again, and we say, okay, we're going to give 2 more projects on the PSDP.
Okay.
Now remember, the PSDP is executed by the federal government. Right? On the other hand, they're crying hoarse that why are these projects being executed by the federal government?
Okay.
Why would you want federal government to be doing more things? So the reason federal government is going beyond its mandate is because you're not executing properly.
Okay.
Now, last point, both, whether you look at the ADPs or the PSDPs, there is an execution problem.
Right.
And how much are you really able to spend versus what you fight for?
Okay, and this is something that I flagged at the very start when I mentioned 18th Amendment, right? Because whenever the federal government actually tries to invest in Sindh or Karachi for that matter, reaction comes that this issue is violation of 18th Amendment, right? I gave you one example of Green Line bus service in Karachi. By Nawaz Sharif. When he launched it, Zardari Saab actually lost it and he got very angry. So this kind of things also keep on happening. But let me go back to Bappi Saab. Bappi Saab, once again, is there a possibility that your government can carry the opposition and the provincial governments along when it comes to policy making?
Okay, just let me add something to what Durrani Sahib said and just need to clarify one more thing. The division between the provinces is being done on the basis of population, and that was done by the People's Party government on the basis of NFC award. No province can claim more than which actually has been given to them, and that was based, Sindh and Balochistan cannot claim for more just because they are taking more taxes or they are giving more on the gas or the energy part. Or even Punjab cannot claim more for giving the food basket to the province, to the Pakistan, or even the KPK cannot claim more just because having more electricity being provided throughout the Pakistan. So every province gets its own share on the basis of the population they get, which is very equally done by the People's Party formula which they derived in 2011 and 12. Now, going further, what federal government has been doing, and I'm so proud that Prime Minister Imran Khan, at least he proves that he works as a Pakistani. At least he proves that he works for the Federation. No one can at least put a finger on him and say that he is being more Punjabi and less Sindhi, or maybe more KPK or less Balochistan. His preferences to all the provinces have been going very fine. When we go for the dirty politics and the blame game part, that's where things go really bad. Frankly, calling him as the Prime Minister, having Imran Khan, and calling Imran Niazi, that's where things, go a bit wrong on that side. So I don't think so. Prime Minister have some more, his notions, his motives, to take this nation along are very much clear. He wants to take the opposition along, but at times things are so murky. It is very difficult to tread among those murky waters and leading from Islamabad when sort of mudslinging comes from the area like water. last 2 weeks were very difficult. Having talk shows late in the evenings with somebody coming from Sindh, even telling them the exact figures, what sort of water Punjab is getting and what amount of Sindh is getting, that was so difficult to convince them that actually the water is going perfectly fine. But on political side, it was very emotional. So it takes, at times it becomes very difficult to convince every stakeholder that Prime Minister Imran Khan is taking up, neutral field, but politics is what politics is all about probably.
Right. Ali Rashid Saab, your reaction, your response to this?
Well, look, now I'm not going to talk about the performance of Mr. Khan because I think not too long ago he himself admitted that in the past 2.5 years we haven't actually been able to do the kind of work we should. We have failed, but we haven't given up, yet we are trying to perform. So a man who has already admitted that yes, we have not been able to perform, so I'm not going to dispute or discuss the fact that how has the performance been of Khan Saab, because I think he's admitted, and which is a good thing if you can actually identify the problem, that's half the solution, so that's fine, so that's there. But that being said, the water issue, whatever it was there, it was the 91 Water Accord, and according to those, the agreement and all the points were not being met, and we did feel that Sindh was not getting its due share. And it's not just the 91 Water Accord which is there in Pakistan, it's also international law. It's safeguarded by international treaties that any province which is in the end and the water flow comes from above, you have to give them the due share. So whatever I'm trying to say, that there are a lot of issues. I think all my friends here right now, if they're saying that the situation is perfect and the government's performing well, you know it and I know it, they're not. I hope they do. I'm a Pakistani. It would make me, I would be the most happiest person, putting our differences aside, if my country can progress and if my federal government can perform. But we need to have dialogue. We need to have meetings. There are forums for it. And this is not the first letter which has been written by the CM. None of his letters have been responded to. And even right now, the letter which was written by the CM to the Prime Minister, I've heard, I think Mr. Ali Zaidi is responding to it. It's not politics. We're seriously, genuinely wanting to work. We genuinely want to address these crises, and we want to work together.
Ali Rashid Saab, when it comes to the Sindh government, this program has been very objective, and whenever the Chief Minister actually contributed to certain high quality things, we always projected that as well. But the problem is not merely a letter, but the whole exchange of hostilities that continue to take place. First it was a letter, then it was leaked to the media, then CM actually speaks in Karachi yesterday. There too he repeats his allegations, and we have been seeing this war of words even today, continuing on television.
Okay, can I say, now please now hear me out. I'm telling you, the common man right now living in Pakistan with the food inflation is not happy with Mr. Khan. The opposition parties are not happy with Mr. Khan. Khan Saab's own party, there is a Hum Khayal group who are not happy with Imran Khan. Then there is, please tell me one person or one individual who is satisfied with Mr. Khan. His allies,
right.
MQM,
right.
They are not happy with him. He keeps announcing Karachi package. 1 second, please, let me complete.
Ali Rashid Saab, I'm coming back to you. Allow me to just say one thing. I was just informed that we have to start concluding the program. So I will just request you to incorporate what you're saying into your conclusions so that I can ask others to conclude as well. Please go ahead.
Okay, basically, I'll say it again. I'm saying Mr. Khan and his whatever he's doing, there is not a single individual who is happy with him or who is satisfied with what he's doing. His own party, there's a Hum Khayal group who is not happy and by what he's doing. His own allies, NQM and other parties are not happy with him. He keeps making promises, the package for Karachi and this and that, which never comes through. Then the opposition is not happy with him, nor are the common people.
Okay,
so,
but although I wanted you to actually add to it your own aspirational bit as well, but if that is the conclusion you want to go with, please, if that's okay with me, let me come back to the studio, ask Amir Zafar Duttani Saab to conclude as well.
Well, thank you very much. Look, 2-3 clarifications so that it's your program. I want the host not to be blamed for anything. First and foremost, just to add to what Bapi said, the population 82%, poverty contributes 10.3%, revenue collection, how much effort you make yourself, contributes 5%, and inverse of the population density is another 2.5%. This is the actual formula that makes up how the divisible pool